At some point in your career, you're going to find yourself working for a profit center. And remember what that means. There's profit centers and cost centers all throughout organizations. But those profit centers, they're the ones that bring home the bacon. They're the reason the organization exists. And the cost centers are usually there to support the various services that are needed to run profit centers. So you're going to find yourself in a profit center. So what does that mean? That means again you're bringing home the bacon. You're providing that health care to the patient. Maybe it's an outpatient ambulatory service center. People are coming to you for surgeries. You're providing those surgeries. You might be supplying hospitals with MRI machines or various supplies or drugs that they need. You are, selling to other organizations. So it can be on both sides. You could be selling to organizations, or you could be looking at selling to individuals who are buying your services. In this case, in most cases, the healthcare. Okay. Now, what we talked about in the previous lecture was you as someone who's purchasing items through trade credit and kind of monitoring what trade credit is and why it's important and looking at the terms of those of that trade credit. We're going to look at kind of the opposite side of the equation with accounts receivable management. People owe you money and you want to manage how that money is coming into you. As I said earlier, there's two competing forces. You want your money because you provided something. Maybe you've provided someone a surgery. You want paid for that surgery as quickly as possible. On the flip side, the person or third party payer paying for that surgery generally wants to put that off as long as possible. So you have these kind of conflicting interests in there. Now you have legal binding agreements where you do say certain monies are due by a certain time, or things get really ugly and we involve lawyers and collection agents. But within that normal zone, and we won't really talk about when it gets ugly, but in that normal zone, you do have that those two competing pressures of you wanting to collect your money as quickly as possible and them wanting to delay payment to you as long as they can. One of the things you need to monitor is really the average data collection. So average days to collection. So when you're looking at people owing you money, you want to keep track of that. And you might have your boss, come into your office and say, we've got to get our collection days down. What does that mean? So I'm going to give you some basic, simple walkthrough of days to collection. It is something that you might be exposed to depending on what areas that you're in within healthcare. It is a concept that you want to know, period, as far as no matter what area of business and healthcare that you're going to be in, because it is extremely important. You will hear this mentioned. It may not necessarily impact your particular area at certain points in your career, but you'll hear this mentioned as a corporate metric. So when you go to the big meetings and the CEO is up there and they're talking for 15 minutes about strategies to reduce that time period to collections down, how to get that down, it is a big deal for organizations and even drilled down to individual departments. So let's go through kind of a simple walkthrough to show you some very fundamental tool to how to understand that. And we're going to go to our magic blue graph paper to walk through some samples.
All right, well, let's take a look at average collection period and what that means. So imagine you have kind of a bucket. You have a bucket, and in that bucket are all of the people that owe you money. And some of them are pay you really quickly, some of them not so quickly, and kind of everything in between. What you want to find, and often used as a measurement, is something called average collection period. So you're really asking yourself, with that whole bucket of customers, what is the average time that it takes us to get paid? So let's start off with a very simple example on how to calculate this. Imagine your accounting department has told you, well, we have within that bucket of customers that owe us money, 30% of the folks pay us in, let's say, 10 days. Okay? And then we have 20% that pay, they're not too bad. They pay in 20 days. And then we've got the real slow people. We've got 50% that pay in, let's say, 35 days. Wow, they're really pushing it. So there's kind of the profile of what we have in our bucket of accounts receivable. To find our average collection period is really easy. You can probably, hopefully, are seeing the connection right now. We have a percentage and then a unit, a percentage and then a unit, a percentage and then a unit, and we're looking for an average. What does that look like? Weighted average. We've been using weighted averages in various forms throughout the course. So that's all we're going to do here, is we're just going to set this up as a simple weighted average. So let's see what that looks like. So we've got 30%. I'm going to write that as a 0.30 times 10 plus our 20% of our folks. That's going to be a 0.2 times, let's see, that's 20 days. That's our units in this case. Could be days or apples or tongue depressors, anything, but in this case we want to find the number of days in this particular weighted average. And then we're going to have these really slow payers. We have 50% of those, and that is going to be in 35 days. So we're just going to do the math here. That's going to be 3. Let's see, that's going to be 4. And then plus 17.5. Let's see, add those up together. Again, I hope you're following along with me in pencil, paper, and calculator to kind of see how this is done. That is going to work out to be 24.5 days. Okay, so how do we interpret that? It's really, on average, it's taking 24.5 days to collect from our customers. And what you're going to want to do is you're always going to want to be bringing that down, or at least monitoring that to your whatever your target collection period is. Now let me throw one little thing into the mix here. Let's say you're one of these really nice people that offer trade credit. How would trade credit factor into this calculation? And there is a little bit of a thing to know if you have trade credit and how you're going to plug in your average collection period. And it involves that principle of conservatism, of kind of choosing the most conservative answer, the one that is kind of the one that's I guess not as optimistic as possible, because that always puts you at, I guess, less risk. If it doesn't turn out as great as what you were calculating, that would be a surprise. So generally you want to default to the most conservative choices. You'll see what I mean here in just a second. So let's take this same example, but now let's plug in some trade credit in here. Oh, let's say you decided your company has terms of 2 and 10, and your net 30. Remember what that means from the last lecture. You're going to give a 2% discount if paid in 10 days. If not, that's okay, but you gotta pay me in 30 days the full bill, the full amount that you owe us. All right, so let's break this down. Same numbers here with our buckets that we have. I'm gonna, our bucket of customers that owe us money, our accounts receivables are right in here. Same proportions in here. So we still have our customers that have that 30% times 10 days. We're going to stick with that. Plus, now we have 20% of our customers that pay in 20 days. Here is the catch. This particular number right here, 20 days, falls within the trade credit period. Okay? So does the 10 days. Our trade credit period really is from day, if you think about it, from day 0, you got something, think of it this way, something special is going on with you. From day 0 to day 30, you're getting credit. You're getting something unique. You get something really special in the first 10 days. Okay? You get an actual discount. From day 11 through 30, you don't get a discount, but you don't have to pay us. That's good too. This part of the form of the trade credit is good because I don't have to pay you yet. I can still let that money sit in my pocket and not yours. Yes, I've lost the discount, but I can still hold on to that money and do whatever I want with it for a few more days. So when you have trade credit and you're doing the average collection period, you want to use basically a couple of default numbers if these percentages, these categories, if they fall into these areas. In this particular case, with the 20%, it falls within and between, it comes after our discount, okay, which was on up through day 10, and it falls before day 30. It's in this zone. When I do that, I want to actually use, instead of the 20 days, I want to use the 30 days. Because there could be some wiggle room within that zone where the customer could go to the 30-day period. So kind of if you think about the principle of conservatism, you'll want to go to, yes, they fall right in this area, right between here and here. I want to use the 30. Okay, so that's, when you see me, that's the trick. So I'm going to plug in, it's still 20%, but I'm going to assume the worst, which is those customers, their behavior could be changed, and they could go all the way out to 30 days. In this, with the first part of the formula, we had 30% of the customers paying within 10 days. They fit into that bucket right here anyway, so that kind of worked out. If for some reason this problem was set up, and let's say that instead of 10 days, it said 7 days, what would you use? Would you use the 7 or would you use the 10? Remember, they're going to fall right in this zone right here. They're going to fall, I don't know, day 7 would probably be right about here. What would you use? You would default to the 10. So hopefully you kind of see the pattern. If you see trade credit, you've got that policy, or within your organization, or you see this within a problem, you're going to want to default to kind of these numbers up here if that customer behavior falls in these various zones. Hopefully that makes sense, okay, in these areas right here. Just so happened that this first part worked out just great, so I didn't have to change anything. But with this part, with the 20%, I did. I have to actually boost that number up to 30. And you're going to see let's see what the overall effect of that is. I think you can intuitively know what that means, but let's see how a trade credit policy will affect potentially our average collection period. And let's fill in the second part of this. That's 50% pay at 35 days. I'm just going to leave that as is. Why am I leaving that as is? Because that's going to exist out in here. It's outside of my trade credit policy. All right, so let's go ahead and calculate what we've got. That's going to stay at 3, just like we calculated above. That's going to 6, and that's going to stay at 17.5. That is going to give me, adding that up, checking that out in the calculator, we're going to get 26.5 days. So, look at that. And that would make sense. And that's something that we would want to, I guess, quantify in some respects. That a trade credit policy is going to have the potential to potentially adversely affect our collection period. Without that, we're going to stay at the 45.5 days. With it, we are going to say, as a conservative estimate, at 26.5. Again, because those customers, their behavior could fall anywhere within this zone. They may go to here, they may pay on the 12th day, they may pay on the 29th day, but they are generally using that free period, no discount, but they're using other people's money, basically my money as the provider of the service, the equipment, the whatever. So it's best to default to these higher numbers that are found within your trade credit policy, or whatever that trade credit policy is going to be. So there you go. That is how to understand average collection period. Just know, if anything, again, if you go away out of this class knowing what an average collection period is, that's good. I guarantee you, when you're sitting in these high-level meetings, when you're hearing about organizational goals, that collection period, that time to be getting paid is huge, and especially in healthcare, with third-party payers, with healthcare reform, with Medicaid, with Medicare. Just read a big article about the difficulties in getting timely payment from Medicare. It is a big deal. And, because you provide a service and you want paid for that service. Physicians provide a service that they want paid. Nobody wants to be waiting 90 days to get paid for something that they've done. So this is a very big issue within healthcare, being able to speed up that average collection period. Again, there can be a lot of boundaries, a lot of barriers to getting that collection period faster. And you don't, as an organization, you don't necessarily, is our goal always to have a 0 or a 1, day average collection period? Probably not. There's competitive pressures out there. If you had a physician's office that said, yeah, you can come in, but it's cash only, and we want paid immediately for services rendered when you leave the building. We don't collect insurance. We want all that money right up front. Or if you had a physician practice that was normal and collected the copay and all the insurance stuff happens behind the scenes and they eventually get paid, 45, 50 days later, you'd probably go to the other physician practice. So there is like it's a competitive nature to have a collection period, but it is something you want to be aware of, and that you have a target for that you're keeping a pulse on that. You don't want that to run away. When collections get out too far, they're actually deemed uncollectible. And as I talked about in the previous lecture, once, if you're reaching that, 60-day mark, it depends for each industry, but if you're reaching a 60-day period and they haven't paid you, chances are you're not going to get paid, and it gets very expensive and very nasty, and you probably won't get anything if pennies on the dollar. So keep track of your collection periods, how long that's taking for you to get collected, and then it fits in with what your organization deems as a good target for that. All right, hope you enjoyed this lecture and learned a little bit about collection periods.